wasn't chump mooching off its popularity, he was a seasoned and experienced patron of the game, and his skills were regularly showcased in the content he produced, which often revolved around challenges that tested his in-game ability as well as his rather popular Minecraft Manhunt series. Although he wasn't regarded as a force of personality, his proficiency with the game hand was highly admirable, and as more people tuned in, his channel picked up momentum, though I'm not sure anyone could have predicted where he would be today.
I just hit 25 million. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys.
You see, in the space of 2 years, he went from 1,000 subscribers or so to over 20 million, which I think is what some would call blowing up. He streams with a crew known as the Dream Team, which includes old and new friends alike. He uploads on a semi-regular basis and has various successful side hustles. It would be fair to take a glance at his channel and say he's doing alright for himself. But is this the full story? Such a great amount of success in such a short amount of time is certainly a lot to adjust to, alongside the increased sense of influence and responsibility you hold. However, it's nothing that creators aren't used to, is it? Well, I want to introduce a new feature of YouTube stardom, that being what many regard as stan culture. Many of you probably wondered what the basics are surrounding this. The term is derived from the infamous Eminem song Stan, short for stalker fan. The one about an obsessed fan who goes postal when Marshall doesn't immediately return the affection that the title character bestows onto the rapper. It's a pretty great but also deeply uncomfortable portrayal of fan-idol relationships, and a stark reminder of how obsession and attachment can manifest themselves in very ugly ways. Nowadays, however, it doesn't seem to quite carry the grave implications, but still refers to those who may be slightly overzealous in their support for popular figures. Twitter has been fertile grounds for such a culture to manifest itself, often following renowned celebrities such as Ariana Grande, Nicki Minaj, and of course the K-pop genre, most notably the household name BTS, who have definitely spawned some of the most passionate devotees. I can see the gifs now. This can be quite controversial, and there have been a considerable number of situations which have involved celebrities distancing themselves from these social media platforms due to antics attributed to these communities. With that said, there hasn't been too much direct involvement from the targets of their affection, as is the case with most celebrities. They make the music, the media appearances, they do their job, but they don't tend to be outspoken on issues like this unless they view it as absolutely essential. PR is a tightrope, and most walk it without swaying. However, as I've said many times before, YouTubers tend to have a more intimate relationship with their audience. They tend to be more interactive, and the online platform makes them feel at least a bit closer to us than the traditional personage. So what happens when you put the two together? Well, that's the question that reared itself with our friend Dream here. But why? Stans have been around forever. Even before we had a name for them, there have been communities set up to champion other creators. I should know, I've been to a James Marriott meet and greet. Yet as Dream's viewership continued to balloon, his standing grew respectively, eventually procuring a consciousness of its own, and even a little title, the DT Twit. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that, but one which, to say the least, was certainly quite ardent in its support of the newfangled internet sensation. To be honest, it was quite unique how invested many people seemed to be, but it's pretty harmless. In fact, most of the time, being part of a community like that merely constitutes of lending your undivided support to a creator and their ventures. And if you want to go and support someone in such a way, then I don't think anyone should obstruct that. And to be honest, if a creator's more involved with their audience, that can regularly be quite a positive and rewarding experience. There's one caveat though, and that's YouTube drama, an omnipresent facet of this delightful site. Someone of Dream's status, with the level of influence he had, with his astronomical rise to fame, was going to be subject to significant levels of pressure, and dare I say it, controversy, whether he was an outwardly tendentious figure or not. Devoted stans, a large YouTuber, and internet drama. I mean, what could possibly happen? Well, let's find out. Ladies, gentlemen, everyone, I suggest we begin. Insert Dream Becoming Nightmare punchline here.
Winter comes sooner than you think. Switch to winter tires for better traction and performance. Choose from 17 Toyota recommended tire brands. Count on the right tires at the right price, thanks to Toyota's Price Match Promise.
How one interacts with their fans in general is a philosophy personal to that creator, and plenty of YouTubers have different ways of approaching it. Some are very involved in the communities that surround them, others prefer to maintain a degree of separation. Like everything, there's a popular spectrum. You don't want to be too far away from your audience to the point where you don't really understand what they want or what they expect of you. At the same time, you don't want to be too close to them to the point that you foster toxic parasocial relationships. When you think of Minecraft and you think of the average Minecraft enjoyer, many likely imagine a kid with a creeper t-shirt and a diamond pickaxe toy that isn't even made of diamond. And to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if a majority of Dream's YouTube following was at least somewhat comprised of that demographic. However, go on Twitter and you'll see quite a contrasting portrait, and certainly not that stereotypically associated with Minecraft. One thing I mentioned at the start when talking about a fan base is that it is often influenced by the creators themselves. However, stans don't necessarily play by the same rules. Now, of course, I don't doubt that many do hold a legitimate interest in the genre that Dream finds himself in. However, stans are often characterized online more by their pattern of their behavior towards the creator rather than their specific interest in the content itself. These will often involve tweets, threads, fan cams, edits, fanfictions, all that jazz, which proclaims their love for the creator in question. A lot of stans, particularly ones in online communities, are also known for their social sensitivity. Now, this isn't a casual statement, as I've had friends who've been subject to the surprising amounts of insert phobic here harassment when even saying the slightest criticism against a K-pop group. But generally speaking, online stans are more committed to social causes than the average fan base. They also have a stronger sense of community and identity, and are a bit more robust in where they stand ideologically. Minecraft, on the other hand, has been traditionally associated with your stereotypical gamer, many of whom are not particularly political at all, and others who certainly possess somewhat questionable ideas. You're probably all aware of Minecraft creator Notch's takes by now. It's an interesting intersection, and probably part of the reason that the stans have never really been traditionally associated with that genre. Now, this doesn't mean that creators they had followed didn't dabble in Minecraft. That was probably what switched many of the stan community onto Minecraft creators in the first place. But Dream was a distilled MC gamer, and a pretty decent one at that. With that said, a stan's elevated commitment to a creator regardless of genre makes them pretty versatile in who they can support, and they had chosen their king. But let's talk about that said king in person.
Why are you trying to like can you see it? Please just swim. Drive the boat.
As said, he's a very skilled Minecraft player, and he was never an outwardly unpleasant person. He wasn't overtly bigoted, and although we'll discuss some curious takes in due course, there was no obvious reason to hate him. However, he also wasn't the most diplomatic person, and he definitely had a very competitive streak to him, with a dashing assault on the side. Now, I don't think his attitude was particularly exceptional. As a matter of fact, I think him and I are quite similar in that regard. But the difference is, in spite of the fact that I am a massive gamer, I don't ground my persona in playing online games, nor do I think I have an audience who would take my in-game passion particularly seriously, because, you really shouldn't. Stans, on the other hand, can be very serious, and there are a plethora of reasons for this, partly because of who they are. They may be young, they may read code differently, or they may just want to show their commitment to their beloved creator. There are people in an array of fandoms who vie for the approval of their heroes, to even receive moments of recognition for their devotion to that icon. That leads people to actions that may not necessarily be viewed as healthy or productive to the world around them, or other people in pursuit of a Twitter reply. Plenty of studies published have documented traits exhibited by those who engage in celebrity worship of any kind. On one hand, you'll have people who are a bit more connected to reality. On the other, you'll have people who believe that if these celebrities saw them in a restaurant, they'd come and sit down for a chat. Many want to believe that. Now, as noted, celebrities often have limited scope in acknowledging public support, rather than a few generalized statements about how much they love you guys. I discussed that spectrum which many YouTubers occupy, and although some certainly express affection for their devotees, many still maintain a professional distance. Dream wasn't of that persuasion. He'd always conveyed gratitude to those he felt responsible for his success, and that definitely encompassed many within the stan community. He was also just extremely active and interactive on Twitter, which enabled plenty of positive exchanges with his supporters. He'd engage with them, make them feel valued, wanted, part of a greater movement, and for the earlier part, his time in the spotlight was quite blissful. Dream's relationship with his audience was tight-knit, and for every positive interaction they had, he gave people more reasons to support him. He made it a rewarding experience. To the average fan, there were a lot of perceptible benefits to standing Dream. Pair this with the natural yet impressive growth of his channel, and it seemed like a recipe for mutual success was brewing. However, it's a two-sided coin, because although Dream was hot shit and he kind of knew he was, the problem is that when that's undermined or challenged, it can regularly cause an emotional response. Now, that emotional response from someone like Dream wouldn't inherently have any repercussions. In fact, amongst friends, it can often be laughed off. The problem is that when you involve people who don't have that context nor that necessary understanding of how to handle situations, a ripple effect occurs where any sort of negativity is amplified because those more devoted want their commitment to go unparalleled, especially when dealing with drama. But so far, we hadn't really had any of that. Let's introduce it then. There's always been discourse over the healthiness of Stan mentality, but it's never been particularly targeted, and if you want to go back to his early prosperity, many wouldn't even pay mind to this. But as excitement for Dream reached fever pitch, this often spilled onto other creators and communities who were not the most enthusiastic about it. The problem is that it's not just Dream that's closer to the communities, it's all of Dream's friends, collaborators, associates, anyone he interacts with at all, even people just in the outer fringes of the genre. And like many normal human beings, not all of Dream's online exchanges were as wholesome as one may idealize. And as it persists, people begin to notice and equate a lot of the worst antics of Dream and his fan base. This began to emerge at the end of summer 2020, when there was a flurry of incidents attributed to Dream stans, particularly relating to other creators and how they often mixed with each other. This pattern of behavior that they were often associated with wasn't met warmly by YouTubers or their respective communities. Now, when you're dealing with stans of certain celebrities, I'd argue that they have the capacity to behave with a lot more toxicity than Dream's audience ever did, especially towards other artists. But once again, that disconnect often distances both parties from possible consequences such toxicity may yield. This is not the same with YouTubers and Twitch streamers who often invested heavily in their platforms and are much more likely to use them to voice their opinion.
This is not a dead end, you're fine. Oh. Oh, Techno Blade! Oh!
You fools! You fools! You messed with the wrong
This
man!
is a YouTuber called Technoblade. He is a known collaborator with Dream, having what many describe as a friendly rivalry. Emphasis on the friendly. Towards the back end of August, he competed in a duel against our Minecraft overlord here. It was hosted by our good friend Mr. Beast, and in typical Beastly fashion, the winner would take home $100,000 and the title of Best Minecraft Player. A very objective denomination, if I say so myself.
3 hard! No! Oh no! Oh, Dream down! Dream, no! No, Dream! No! Okay, the times are turning, the times... No! What? No way! No way! No! No! My goodness! Bro, no way!
Puberty.
Technoblade, you animal!
In what was seen by some as a bit of an upset, Technoblade had the audacity to defeat Daddy Dream, and with his pride somewhat dented at that point in time, Dr. Eamon passed a few offhand comments during his post-mortem.
Running around the rock in a circle, and I couldn't, like, I literally just couldn't do anything. Like, he was just running around in a circle until he healed. And then, I think it's depending on the day, it could have gone either way. It just depends on the day, how they do. They get the lucky rod, the lucky shot, whatever. We won, and I think that's amazing. I mean, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with Techno. 1.16. I've got a bunch of insane 1.8 players on 1.14, and just like never lost to them. And then they're sitting there like, wow, like 1.16 is insane. So I think people don't realize how impressive it is that
In a similar vein, many of Dream's more ardent viewers sprung to the defense of their lead, with many proclaiming their annoyance and disappointment, with a few going for more extreme lengths, providing ample fuel for a variety of compilation videos. Techno never commented on this himself, splitting the money with Dream as part of their pre-duel agreement, hopefully also signaling the absence of any bad blood. Nonetheless, it provoked discourse within the Reddit and Twitter communities in particular, with some expressing frustration at Dream's own behavior, and questioning how his own attitude could influence that of his audience. A few more clips then also began circulating about other creators who'd had their own run, with the more passionate factions of Dream's followers.
I didn't know anybody there. I only knew Frenios and I guess Dream through like association.
It's healthy. You say who?
Also, I looked at one of their chats, and none of them liked me. None of them liked me because I killed Dream one time.
I know that feel. I know that feel, Connor.
So I was like, man, I'd rather not
Did
go to
people
bed
get
depressed.
angry?
This in turn led to some questioning Dream's own failure to moderate his own fanbase, with some even proposing that they be disciplined, though I'm not sure how that would be enforced. However, it seems these pleas mostly fell on deaf ears at the time, as may report in the next few days that creators, including Dream, had their names published and shared online, and one guy by the name Tubbo, a 16-year-old creator, had received death threats after making a statement in stream about ACAB, that being all cops are bastards.
What
You
does that
know-
even mean?
So it's basically about all cops are bad, or no, all cops are
That's
bastards.
just not true.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Where are you
Oh
going?
yeah, no, don't say that. I think it's more. I don't think it means the individual cops. I think it more is referring to the idea of the police state. How,
Oh.
like the idea of. I don't. You shouldn't say that if you don't know enough about it.
Oh.
It's fine. It's
I
fine.
mean, in the UK, they're great.
Now, it's important to note that these debates were also internal, and many stands were concerned about these issues as well. But the problem was that discourse never really resulted in any proper change, because there were plenty of people ready to deny or at least downplay this. And the problem with that toxic minority is that they're often the most influential ambassadors of a community, because they are louder, hence why they're referred to as the vocal minority. And as people have negative experiences with them, they then create a mental image in their head of what this community is like. Whether that image is accurate or not, then that begins to spread and manifest into something new. And what was formerly this wholesome movement begins to contort itself, and you really need someone like Dream, the figurehead of this, to speak to common sense. Did he though? Dream's quite active on his Reddit, and did actually respond to some who he believed were interpreting his actions somewhat uncharitably, clarifying that he was merely taking an analytical stance on the situation rather than trying to make excuses. This is a fair response. At the end of the day, I'm sure both players in the duel had the capacity to win, and whether he was assigning too much responsibility onto circumstance over ability is besides the point. I don't think he was unreasonable, whether you agree with him or not. He also pledged his continued commitment to discouraging malefactions from users within his community, referring to a stream where he did indeed mention
I
it.
feel like probably I don't want to say my community is more toxic, but I think my community probably is more toxic. And
Ooh, why don't you stick the knife in harder and twist it, Dream?
but I wouldn't want. I think that if I had won, people techno would have never heard the end of it. I think if he
that's
won,
a-
I think.
Oh, that's such a nice thought. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Well, that's why I said I think it's part of the.
Admittedly, an aside on a stream isn't exactly the most potent statement. In fact, it was more like an acknowledgement rather than a request to his viewers. But you can't expect him to make a tweet and video every 5 minutes. In Dream's position, he wouldn't necessarily want to make a big deal out of it anyway, because it would probably just yield more conflict. And at this point, it wasn't worth the drama. However, it should have been a warning worth heeded. If Dream was leaving all those disclaimers as he said he was, and nothing was happening, it was a sign that it was going to take a bit more to suppress the action of his supposed fans. Additionally, his Reddit response didn't really answer the comparisons being drawn to other creators who had seemingly been more proactive in preventing toxic behavior. At the least, if he had made a more official statement, it would have been a benchmark for his stance, and he could have disowned any abuse towards those in his circle. It's clear that people weren't listening enough, because it wasn't even just the public figures facing down the front of the toxicity. Barely a week after the techno debacle, Dream sent a sassy reply to someone, and another person believed to be a stan claimed to have their dog. Although Dream later clarified he was joking, and so did Mystery Stan, it was once again a little too late. It should have been presumed that Dream was against the behavior that some stans had enacted, even against himself, and yet the question continued to loom and mutate, only furthering the tension between critics and fans. But why? Well, I'll do my best to explain. I have to say I've been left in a bit of a conflicted state by this point. There was definitely a lot of questionable behavior being carried out, but I wasn't sure who the perpetrators were. It's very easy to immediately point your fingers at these stands, but a large majority of tweets on the matter were people condemning these actions, and even the toxicity in YouTube comment sections could not necessarily be tied back to people directly within these communities. Just because someone was a fan of Dream didn't mean they were a part of the Twitter stan community. However, that comparison was continuously drawn. For example, another creator by the name of Bolfy posted a screenshot of his comment section, and many people who asserted that he was practically discounting Dream, assumably because of the crudely drawn smiley face, which, as we all know, represents Dream and nothing else. Once again, these comments were really dumb, but were they all made by stans or just fickle viewers who may also watch Dream? It's hard to say, and although you can't easily tie YouTube accounts to their respective Twitter handles, that assumption that all these people making ill-educated comments are immediately stans when they possess an equally elementary understanding of the creator in question seems to disregard the system of due process. However, I guess when there are issues as inconsequential as the ones discussed so far, it's very easy to judge situations somewhat haphazardly. Nonetheless, the problem is that a lot of small incidents can often snowball, particularly when people receive impressions of a fan base from those incidents, and it wasn't long until the caricature of the zealous Dream stan began to spread. I think this is because many people drew parallels between comments that seemed obsessed with associating everything with Dream to those obsessed with Dream, the stans. But at this point, I'd say it was more hypothetical than proven. This had two outcomes though. Firstly, it made people in neighboring and adjacent communities more hostile to Dream and his stans, and it made the Dream stans themselves more defensive. And although Dream had proudly proclaimed that he dissuaded toxicity, he would regularly jump at the opportunity to come to the aid of his stans. This statement from September, barely a month after the Techno situation, asserted 90% of the time the people who complained just hated him, or were blowing a non-existent problem out of proportion. And given what we've discussed, it's understandable why people were being a bit more defensive. At the same time, the problem was this focus on beating this narrative often then ignores the fact that there may be an actual problem, and it was gradually emerging. In fact, a few days after this tweet, another creator, Wilbur Soot, who had replied to Dream's statement after being called out in the replies, was stopped streaming prematurely due to purported toxicity in his chat. In this case, this was likely because Wilbur wouldn't give Tubbo, another creator, his colour in Among Us. I can't say whether this was the case or not, but as long as people perceived it that way, then frictions between communities and creators would continue to run. And yes, you can't ignore the fact that 90% allows for 10% of legitimate complaints. It's not an absolute statement. At the same time, it's still a narrative against the critics as long as he doesn't give credence to that 10%, which he can barely squeeze beyond a brief acknowledgement in the reply. However, 10% of a large number is still a large number, or a significant one at least. For example, Wilbur, he had no reason to hate stans, and he clearly doesn't. He merely had some negative experiences. But some used this statement to challenge him as well. It seemed to deepen this rift between those who resented Dream and those who supported him, because the former once again felt that he was dismissing the concerns, and those who supported him felt validated in their sentiments of unjust persecution. The term antis also began garnering popularity around this time, which was basically the slang way to describe people who criticized Dream and the community around him. I've never been particularly fond of such terms because they often serve as a way to dismiss large groups of people, even if some of them have valid observations to make. It often felt like it was becoming an us versus them situation, with Dream stoking the fire. And many would argue that it didn't stop there, with Dream exposing many to the wrath of his own audience. Why would he do this though when it wasn't even his intent in the first place? Well, normally people's behaviour can be viewed through quite a simple lens, that being that one is typically responsible for their own actions and not someone else's. However, being a public figure is quite different because many assume you are responsible, at least in part, for not riling up your audience unnecessarily. Hell, there are even laws in many countries regarding how you speak to the public because we are aware when inflammatory language is espoused, it has the capability to instigate unprovoked harm against innocent parties. This is a rule common to creators as well. You have an audience that is responsive to what you say on a public platform, and when being responsible for how some of those around you may act, you are expected to exercise a degree of self-restraint. And as said, Dream did, but many would ask if it was enough. One of the greatest issues with stans is that they are loyal to a fault, and if many of them see their idol under duress, their instinct is to jump to that creator's defense. On the other hand, if they see a creator calling someone out, they will echo that sentiment, maybe even more assertively. This often isn't a problem. Most creators end up in quarrels which then involve followers who are keen to voice their opinion. It's inevitable with the internet, and provided you're not intentionally misrepresenting the other party, it will have a limited impact long term. People are impulsive, people are emotional, they should be allowed to express themselves online whether they have 20 million subscribers or not. But the question is, to what degree? Well, let's assess the impact first. Dream Dream did have his tendencies to be a bit more outspoken than the average Minecraft creator. The strange paradox is that some of the most vocal people in their content are often some of the most careful on social media. Dream was certainly cautious on what he said, partly because of the fact that he had been called out for previously ill-advised opinions, but he was also quite forthright when he felt strongly about a situation, and as you'll see, strong feelings are risky business. Let's move into September and October, and in and out of interaction with his viewers, our dear Dream decided to hold a giveaway for a Minecraft gift code with his friend and co-founder Dream SMP, George Not Found. George tweeted this code out, excluding the final character. Viewers were then left scrambling to decide which letter or number occupied that gap. However, another creator by the name of